Hi, and welcome back to the Millinery Studio. Today we're going to do a padded headband. It's a nice small project, should only take you a couple of hours, and can use us some scraps that you have in your studio. These are the materials you're going to need. I have an Alice headband I repurposed. Plastic one. I've got thread and scissors and craft felt of any color that you want to use. Again, it's a scrap. My fabric. I have foam, upholstery foam, which you can use, which I didn't use, and this is dacron. I don't know the other name for it, but mine's quite thick, and you can use that for the padding. Now the first thing I'm going to do is take the dacron, and I'm just going to roll the headband along to take a measurement, approximately, and give it a rough cut. I always want to cut it a little bit wider because it's easier to, of course, take it away than it is to add it. And I'm dry fitting, and I found out I was a little short, so I'm going to end up cutting it longer. And you always want to have it longer because I want those bottom ends completely covered. So I'm going to cut it a little longer. I liked the width because you want it to be a little wider than your Alice band, so as you pull the fabric around and glue it onto the inside of the headband, the edge of your Alice band is covered and soft looking as opposed to having a hard edge. So what I'm doing here is I'm just deciding on what I do, and I took my short piece and I'm peeling it because I'm going to end up with 3 pieces, and they're going to gradually get shorter. And the reason why I'm doing that is I again want it graded to be thicker top center and thinner at the ears. So I just want the one layer at the ears, behind the ears I should say. And then, so because I don't want any glue lumps, I'm putting a small dab of glue there, and I'm doing a dry fit, and then I'm scraping the glue on. I just want it to sort of be tacked down, and that's true with all the layers. You just want to tack it down a little so it's not going to move around as you put the fabric on. The fabric itself is going to keep it in place because when you pull the fabric, you're pulling it quite taut. And when I get to the end, I'm going to trim it in a pointed angle so I don't have this lump. You know, if my glue gun stays in, the glue stays in the glue gun. And you can see I'm going to trim it into a point, leaving a little bit of dacron on the sides, and then I'm going to trim it on the top section there so it's not quite as thick as it goes down. I'm going to put that down where I want it to be. You can see I have it up from the very bottom, and again I'm going to scrape it on, scraping on the glue. I'm not sure where I'm going to stop, but I stopped even with the other side and then just trimmed it. So I just trim it, and then I put an angle on it because the angle will make a smooth transition. Putting a little tack, and the third piece, and you can see it's even shorter. Now this one I did ahead of time, and I'm just going to put a little scrape of glue in the middle. I don't want to have globs of glue because that's going to end up feeling like lumps. So not only do you want your project to look nice, you want it to feel nice. You don't want to feel these hard lumps of glue inside. You don't want to see glue. Of course, it's hot glue, so you end up with a ton of threads. And here's my fabric. You can see how tiny of a piece of fabric I have here. So I'm double checking to make sure I have enough, and I want to use the bias of the fabric, which is a cross grain, because of the stretch. I want the stretch of the fabric as I go around a curve, because you're going to get fewer pleats. Now I ended up with some pleats simply because I didn't have enough fabric through the width, and so I did a dry fit for length, and I'm doing a measurement here, not compressing the dacron very much, to see if I have enough width to actually cut it there. And I'm like, I have just enough, so I'm just using a bit of chalk and my dressmaker's tape just to give me a guide. Nothing too special. Keeping the longest piece. You can see how little I had of this fabric, but it's velvet and it's quite thick. But I'm still going to do a test here after I cut it. What you're going to see me do in a little bit is I'm going to take the felt and put it over top of the dacron to see at where the grading of the dacron is. And what I'm trying to do there is determine if I need to put another layer. So there's the felt. I'm putting it on top over the lumps, essentially, of the dacron where it's cut. And I'm seeing, do I need a smooth? That's a piece of silk, because silk would be really indicative. And it doesn't show through. The transitions between the layers aren't showing through. They didn't show through with the felt. They didn't show through with the silk, which means that they're not going to show through with my velvet, because I don't want to see the stepped layers. So now I've just centered it. I've decided how much of essentially a seam allowance that I have to glue down. And then I'm going to start gluing. And you start in the center. And you press it in. Just a little bit of glue. Again, you don't want to have lumps. And then you go on the other side. And you tack it in place. And then you're going to work on one side from the center all the way to the end. A centimeter or two at a time. Going side to side to make sure you have it even. Now, as you're going, I'm pulling towards the bottom piece along the bias length of the fabric. So along the length of the fabric, I'm pulling gently. I want it to be taut, but I don't want it to be too tight. I don't want to compress the dacron too much, just a little. And you go along and you simply just put a little glue and stick it down. And there I'm testing to see how much can I pull. Can I pull a little more? You don't want to pull too little either. And each fabric is going to be different. The amount of dacron is going to be different. The width of your Alice band will determine a little bit how much you pull. If I had more fabric to make a wider piece, I ended up with a few pleats because I didn't have a wide enough piece of fabric. And there wasn't much I could do about it because I didn't have enough fabric width-wise to be able to basically move that excess amount of fabric along to eliminate it, which is really hard to describe, but if you're doing something on the bias, you want to have more fabric than you need width-wise because you can basically move that extra fabric, that pleat, out to the edges because you have lots of extra fabric. And as I'm moving along, of course, I'm getting down to the narrower part of the Alice band, so I'm ending up with more fabric, seam allowance essentially being glued down. And I'll be able to cut, I'm going to cut some off, and you can see that I have a bit extra because when you pull on bias, you get length, which is one of the reasons why I was working on the bias. And there, now, when you get down to the bottom, you're going to have to decide how you want to do it. I do a lot of trimming, and I didn't want to have any lumps at the behind your ear, because essentially that's the section behind your ear, and it would be really uncomfortable to have a lump of fabric and a lump of glue behind your ear. So I keep trimming away excess fabric, and I keep deciding how am I going to fold this in so it's neat. I also don't want to put my felt all the way right down to the very bottom. I want to have a little bit of my fashion fabric on the inside, just a tiny bit. I think it ends up being about a centimeter or so, maybe even a little less. And I am dry fitting to see how I want to do that. And you can see there, and I put glue in, I fold it over, and I absolutely burnt my fingers, which anybody who works with glue guns knows that that's just part of the game. And I don't want to have it excess fabric not pulled tautly around that bottom piece, because then it's going to be loose on the good side. So you can see I'm just folding and making decisions about, and this just comes when you're actually doing it. It all depends on your Alice band and your fabric and a little bit of practice. It's entirely up to you how you do this, but I don't like to have raw edges because raw edges eventually fray. And then I'm going to repeat the whole process on the other side, and there I'm just making sure you can see. Now I have finished it here, and I'm going to go through and I'm just making sure that I have glued down everything smoothly and effectively. Now comes the felt, and I dry fit this felt so many times. So I'm putting it on the inside and roughing the shape in, and then I sped this up because this took me about 20 or more minutes. I'm using chalk to make a bigger thing. Now I use pinking shears, which are the scissors that have the little zigzag to them. You don't have to. I like using them. I think it's nice and neat. Now once you get your size the way you want it, this is the time you'd want to sew in your label. You can see I'm using pinking shears, and I'll probably dry fit it again to make sure I don't have to take any extra off. So if you have a label and you want to sew it in, do it now. I didn't because I didn't actually make this for a customer. And then I'm going to glue it in. Now, because I decided the length of it before I glued it in and felt doesn't stretch if you don't pull it. So I didn't pull it. I just put it in smoothly. So here I am. And again, I'm scraping glue on. I'm not doing blobs of glue because, of course, the more glue you put on and you push it down, it's going to squish out and then you're going to see it. You don't want to see the glue. This is all the magic of making it look really, really neat, is not to have any glue showing, of course. Pushing, scraping glue. I mean, why would I center it in the frame? That would be, logical and much easier for you to see. But I'm just basically repeating processes. There I am, all done. And here she is, all finished. All my little pleats in there. There's a good one. There's a good one right there. You can see there's a pleat there maybe. So if I'd had a wider piece of fabric, I would have been able to have more to stretch over and make no pleats, but I was really trying to get it out of this fabric. So I recommend that you use wider fabric, and that way you can make it nice and smooth with no pleats, because that really is the objective, unless you just want to use some really awesome vintage printed velvet. And that's the padded headband. It really doesn't take very much skill and only a little bit of patience, because it can be really fiddly. And again, I did not have the big enough piece of fabric for this, so I ended up with a lot more pleats in it than I would have liked. However, you didn't really see them because I used black velvet. Had I used another color, you would have really seen it. It's really important that you choose your fabric wisely. I tried to use up this really nice piece of fabric that I had, and that was all I had left. And I think it worked out okay. It's pretty comfortable to wear, and it also is pretty cute. So don't forget to subscribe and comment and send it to your friends. That would be great. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.